To reflect on there. Fantastic. Straight over to you, Duncan.
Okay, I stand between you and questions, so I'll try and keep it quick. It's a fantastic read. It felt like 100 conversations I've had over the years with poor people all over the world, which is just so seldom reflected even in the things I've written about them, because half the time you're editing out the conversations and you're trying to get a narrative and a clear story, and people aren't like that. And it just was fantastic to read. NGOs will be mining it for lyrical quotes about poverty for decades. I mean, here's three, okay? In Colombia, poverty winds around people like a python, so they are unable to breathe. In India, after a malaria outbreak, a shadow of sorrow prevailed in the village. In Andhra Pradesh, government officials are like dogs at burial grounds sniffing around for money. You know, it's just fantastic. I'm just going to have to go and sort of cut and paste for years. It highlights many of the issues which are dear to Oxfam's heart. Individual agency, this question of empowerment and confidence. It actually started reminding me of Richard Layard's work on happiness and well-being. And actually, I can imagine Layard trotting along to the bank with a copy of this and saying, why don't we have cognitive behavioural therapy free on the World Bank? Because actually, it's getting to that sort of that quite interesting understanding of the link between well-being, confidence, and happiness, which I thought was really, really challenging. The discussion on power picks up those issues like power within and power with people in collective groups. The collective action thing, I thought it was very helpful the way that Deepa explained it, that you find a lot of collective action, but it's often associated with people not moving out of poverty, and the way she explains it is because they have a common cause, which is state failure. So when when the state fails, people have to come together, but it's defensive and it doesn't lead to people moving out. That makes sense to me, so thanks for clarifying that one. The whole development as freedom, development being much wider than income, and the access to justice as kind of the missing essential service story is also really good. It largely avoids excessive romanticism about poor people. I think it probably was a bit romantic. It does sort of acknowledge that sometimes poor people turn on each other when one of them gets rich and one of them doesn't, and there are tensions in communities. But it was still pretty starry-eyed, I think, about life in poor communities, which is an interesting criticism from an NGO towards the World Bank, but okay. And like Caroline, I thought, what a fantastic content, and then the conclusions, didn't fully reflect what was in the book, and stopped too short. This book is not long enough, you know? So I think you actually want another book now where you take the content and apply it to what the World Bank advises, what DFID advises, what NGOs advise, what governments advise. You actually want a so what book coming out of this. Maybe that's in the pipeline, I don't know. Okay, but you're not allowed to just say nice things, so here's a few not quite so nice things. There is this weird duet. I don't know if it's Deepa and Lance Pritchett or if it's a sort of methodological thing, but there's this strange duet between the qualitative and the quantitative, where sometimes it's a bit clunky. There's a sudden change of gear where you've had people doing lyrical poverty and suddenly you get into some really dense statistics. And it kind of is quite the gear shifts are a bit grating at times. The big gap in this whole thing was religion. I thought it was really weird that I couldn't actually find almost any reference to religion, and yet if you're thinking about who does the community organisation, who does the creation of confidence and values, who actually provides the safety nets in many situations, it's all about, in many communities, it's much more likely to be about faith and religion than about NGOs or governments or anything else. And yet, this seemed to be a kind of blind spot of the book. The other one I'd say is that the markets chapter, I feel the power of Lant coming in, because the multidimensional poverty approach kind of disappears. It becomes much more orthodox bank stuff, I thought, the markets chapter. And it didn't really look at well-being. It didn't really look at multidimensional poverty. It was quite a traditional, I felt it was quite a traditional sort of, and it didn't do much on gender in that. The gender faded away in that chapter as well. And migration. Also, migration I thought was really interesting in the Morocco case study. I didn't feel that much in the book. Migration's only got sort of a few pages in the section on the family, but surely migration as a path out of poverty is a pretty crucial one. So it would have been interesting in terms of the actual research, how many of the, you know, I don't get any figures, maybe they're in there, but I didn't see them, how many of the stories of people moving out of poverty are linked to either internal or international migration would have been interesting. It's a fantastic book, and it's going to be on my bookshelf, and it's going to be in most of what I write for the next 5 years or so. So thank you very much.